Hey everybody, excited to get to share with you a little bit of an overview of our lesson for this Sunday. We are going to be in the book of Ezra and we'll be focusing on chapters 1, 2, and 3. And so let's remember a little bit about where we've been. The nation of Israel has been in captivity. They have been overtaken by Babylon. That's when we saw Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Nebuchadnezzar, all of those kinds of characters. In and amongst that time, the prophet Jeremiah was also there, and God gave him a word that said after 70 years, the people would be sent out and released from this captivity. So at the beginning of Ezra, that's where we find it. Cyrus has been the king of Persia, and Persia conquers Babylon, and then he releases all of the Israelites to go back home. And so they do that. And that's kind of what happens in chapter 1. Now, chapter 2 can be really easy for us to skip over because it's a list of all of these hard names and numbers, hard names and numbers, hard names and numbers, hard names and numbers. And it's basically their census of everyone who leaves Babylon to head back to Jerusalem. And so, sorry. And so they give an account for every single person. It's like 42,360, I believe. And then it also lists servants and singers. And so basically close to 50,000 people are making this big move. And then whenever they get there, the very first thing that they do at the beginning of chapter 3 is they build an altar to the Lord. And this is really kind of important because this is kind of a do-over time in the nation of Israel. And they choose their very first step to be an altar of sacrifice and worship to God. Very different from some of the past choices that the Israelites have made. And so they do this. And then after they build the altar, they begin to gather the supplies needed to rebuild the temple. And as they begin to rebuild the temple, the priest in chapter 3, verse 11 says, they sang responsively, praising and giving thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever toward Israel. So they could see how God had kept that promise that he had given Jeremiah so many years before. You know, the people had lived in Babylon for so long. Many of the people had died there. Many new ones were born and had spent their whole lives there, but they knew that was not their home. What a story for us that as we live in the world, but we're not of the world, that we know that we are here, but that our real home is in heaven, and how we look forward to that experience, and how they were continually talking about, you know, someday it's coming, someday it's coming, someday it's coming. And then when it happened, they worshiped and they gave sacrifice to God, and they recognized God's faithfulness throughout this whole journey. So in verse 12, as they begin to lay the foundation, there are some of the older priests who were there who had seen the original temple, and they are just heartbroken, and they begin to weep. So you've got this sorrow and you've got this joy happening at the same time. And the noise is so loud that the sound was heard far, far, far away. So this story is a beautiful picture of how God was faithful to his people and helped them to rebuild a physical representation of God's presence with them. For us, it speaks to us that God is still faithful still, and that he is preparing a home for us in heaven one day. And it's so important that we are sharing the hope that we have with every person that we know, because we do not want anyone to miss out on that. We want everyone to have the opportunity to make that choice. So that's kind of the big overview of our story. On your CD, there is a missionary story about the Karen people in Myanmar, Burma. And so that is a great thing to talk about, especially because through the month of January, we are still collecting the Lottie Moon offering. And so to remind them that as we, as families and individuals, give to the Lottie Moon offering, we are helping to reach people groups that have never heard of the gospel of Jesus, have never known what it's like to pray or to have a copy of God's word in their hands. So anyways, I hope that is a blessing to you, and look forward to seeing you on Sunday.